Episode 288 of the TV Dudes, recorded June 24th, 2020. TV Dudes Mixtape. It's Patreon time, you guys. We've got a mixtape of shows this week, and we are leading off. Charles Armstrong took advantage of our showrunner level Patreon, which means he gets to pick another show for us to discuss, and that show is Netflix's Hip Hop Evolution.
Wait, what?
No, we did that last week. We've shielded ourselves from that.
Pun intended.
So no, he picked Hip Hop Evolution, which is on Netflix, which we all fell in love with. He requested us to watch two seasons, and I know we all watch more.
Yes.
That also,
I've seen it all.
That also pairs very nicely with the Beastie Boys story over on Apple Plus. But then we're sticking to reality shows. We're talking about Taste the Nation over on Hulu, which led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole to go watch season 1 of Top Chef. And then a little sidestep into Britishness with The Travel Man. And then we're going to step back in the world of fiction for one more show with the second season of Netflix's The Politician. But before we get to all that, I'm Randy.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Les.
And we are the TV Dudes. And as has become our new tradition, Kyle, let's talk power rankings.
You know, if you're returning, you probably already know the spiel. But if you're a new listener, every week I comb through the internet, I find the ratings that you give all the shows that we talk about, either on IMDb, Metacritic, or Rotten Tomatoes, where they love to talk shit about everything. And I put together the TV Dudes Power Rankings presented by the TV Dudes, where we gather up all the shows that we talked about for the year, and we give them a definitive ranking. And guys, our ranking, it's closing in on lucky number 100.
Yes.
And when Kyle says definitive, he means definitive. Like, I don't care if this thing just won Emmys, if it swept everything. Game of Thrones was going great. We decided it was terrible. Boom. You saw that ending. We did that.
But no, it's weird because stuff that you would think is total shit and nobody likes gets rated so high by the internet sometimes. And then other times you're like, why is nobody talking about Letterkenny on Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes?
I thought it was interesting this week as I noticed as I'm looking through. It's like the Rotten Tomatoes audience gets a reputation for being pretty harsh, but they're actually really forgiving compared to some of the critics. I was looking at like some of their thoughts on one of the shows we'll talk about. Like I was like, oh, the audience was pretty kind to this. The critics fucking hated it.
Yeah, it is fun. Well, let's just jump into it then, because we had 4 shows we talked about last week. Number 4 was a little preview into our game show episode we have coming up soon. It was Don't over on ABC with Ryan Reynolds narrating and Adam Scott hosting. It is number 75 on our list. Actually, no.
Yeah.
Oh, got that wrong. 70. Oh, yeah. Number 75 on our list.
So, Kyle, I noticed, and this is a little behind the scenes for people, you put your thumb on the scale a little bit here because everything got the same score. Who scored it and who didn't?
Yeah, so I want to say IMDb was the only one who scored this. Huh. And that is kind of where this is at right now. It's just too new. Nobody's talked about it yet. So I don't think it's really a judgment on the show that it's so high, low on the list. And it's just one that we're going to have to keep watching week over week and see if it changes.
Now, the next one, though, I think that is a commentary on where it sits on the list and the general vibe of the internet on this show.
Yes,
yeah,
I would agree.
Number 74, Space Force over on Netflix. 234 on our list. This is very low on our list.
That is brutal. I mean, it's 48% at Metacritic, 40% at Rotten Tomatoes, and 77 for the Rotten Tomatoes audience score. So, like, the audience was like, "Hey, this is all right," but the critics, man, they did not like that show.
Gosh, yeah, and it's like everybody's talking about it. Sometimes it gets ranked low because nobody's talking about it. No, it's ranked low because people said it's low.
Yeah. Now, what I don't understand is that, and I realize that a lot of folks I'm seeing it here in the numbers, weren't as thrilled with Avenue 5 as me, but Avenue 5 kicks the living shit out of some Space Force, and it's only like 2 positions above.
I have several friends who do not get Avenue 5, like vocally,
Same.
are like, this show is dumb, I don't understand, I don't like
When
it.
when I looked up reviews of it after like the 3rd or 4th episode, when I was like, this is one of my favorite things week to week, what's going on with why am I not hearing buzz about it? And everybody was like, yeah, the unfunny, not really having anything happening on it, Avenue 5.
Maybe people just don't like space comedy.
Seems like it.
Although I think what's his face kills Seth MacFarlane. What's that Star Trekky show he does?
The Orville, yeah.
Yes.
The Orville. Yeah, gosh, I am ready for some more of that.
Yeah, me too.
That's what we got instead of Blackbird and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spinoff, right?
Oh, is that the case?
I think that's what
So-
she was going to do, and then that didn't happen, and then Orville happened.
Oh, that's
We
actually
got the scoop.
Much as I love Mockingbird, that's a better
Mockingbird.
deal. Mockingbird's one of my favorite
Yeah.
Marvel characters, and I loved Andrew Pilecki playing her. But yeah, I would definitely have sacrificed that show to have the Orville.
Yeah, they can have so much fun over there. Love it. So yeah, last week there was only 2 other shows we talked about, and the second show in the number 41 spot, it's got a 3-way tie with Star Trek Picard, which I loved, and American Horror Story 1984, which I don't think I saw, but that's Hustle.
Now, this is an
Over
older.
there on Amazon Prime.
This is an older show too. That's probably part of it.
It's fairly beloved and is an older show, so it's had some time to build up that ranking despite not having a huge, wide fan base. AHS is, if you watch American Horror Story, you were probably going to watch 84. If you don't watch AHS, you might not have ever even seen it happen. It's on Hulu now, though, and I'd recommend it.
And what's funny is AHS, I think it's that was September. So I think technically it's a 2019 show. So I'm wondering when we do our like end of the year list if we're going to actually rank it and, go by release
Yeah,
date.
because Hustle shouldn't be in there then. I mean, I know it just dropped on Prime finally, but it's been
Yeah.
out for years.
Yeah,
I
this
think
is
there's also an argument for shows we've talked about in 2020. It's
Right.
like our 2020
Yes.
shows we watched.
But that's, I mean, we have old business and stuff. I'm a purist when it comes to top lists, and I will only be ranking shows that aired in 2020.
All right, I love it.
But the top 100 is different. The top 100 is a different. Our power rankings are a different thing than a top 100.
Yeah, speaking of different thing, if you are keeping score from last week, you'll find out that our top ranked show from last week in the number 22 spot was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. over on
Yep.
ABC.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Speaking of Mockingbird,
333.
By top right, we just didn't talk about anything better. It's not. It's a relative scale.
wait a minute. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah,
this is why I don't
I can
trust
check
those
the math.
folks.
I got it up right here.
From the critics, that is not the audience rating. The audience rating is lower. That is crazy.
It's like what
I
if
will
Legends of
say-
Tomorrow were dour?
Yeah, 95%, and then the
I can
audience
see how that
scores
appeals to
89.
critics,
Yep.
I guess.
Well, when a show is on Rotten Tomatoes for a longer period of time, I feel like the rankings most of the time just go up, unless
Yeah.
it's like a one-season show. But the stuff that usually gets renewed, it gets renewed for a reason, and yeah, it's got a 95. Wow.
I predict that it won't be renewed this time. I'm calling it.
This is it.
I'm calling it.
Yeah, this is the final one. The timeless season.
Star Trek Picard, by the way, has a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is 5% lower than that is unacceptable.
Gosh, you guys, here's the thing. Our listeners, they could go over there, Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, they could write reviews, they could get listed, they could skew the numbers. I don't know how it works, but I'm sure they could figure it out.
Yeah. Come on, we're going to
We're
push
telling
Future
you the
Man above Agents
mistakes.
of S.H.I.E.L.D. here.
But this is the critics' ratings. It's not the audience ratings.
Yeah, our audience needs to go get registered
As critics. I don't know how that works,
However
but we're
you
going
do
to
that.
figure out some way to do it. John Oliver would mobilize this army. Come on.
It's true. Yeah.
Oh yeah, if only.
All right.
It
So
needs to be used on better stuff now, though.
thank you, Kyle, for the weekly power rankings update.
Thank you, guys.
So just a reminder, you can support us by going over to patreon.com/tvdudes. Throw us $1 an episode in exchange. We keep up with our streaming services, pay our hosting costs, and you get bonus content each week. Right now, we are making our way through the Fast and the Furious franchise, and this week's bonus episode is the return of Dom as we watch Fast and Furious. First time through for me. Also first time through for you, Les?
Yes. I realized that I have seen the first movie, Tokyo Drift, and Fast 5. That's it.
So you're jumping around a little bit.
A little bit. I realized that watching Fast 4 today, actually.
I'm the exact opposite. I've seen 1 through 4. In fact, back when they came out, I saw them a bunch. And then 5 was the first one where I think maybe I've seen parts of it on cable, but when I go to watch it next week, I'm going to be pretty fresh.
Oh, man, you're in for a treat. You're watching as it gets better.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have no idea how much sweat can come out of The Rock's chin thing. I don't know what 90s band he's the bassist for in this movie, but it's fucking rad.
We also have this level called Showrunner, where you can throw in $20, and then you can add 1 or 2 shows in our rotation. Charles Armstrong took advantage of that. He asked us to watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which we did, reluctantly. And then...
Turned out to be awesome, though.
Awesomeness.
And yes, I'm being ironic and not ironic at the same time.
But we're all much more excited by his second choice, which was Netflix's Hip Hop Evolution. And why don't we go talk about some new business, and we'll start with that.
Gosh, yeah, new business. I mean, it almost falls into both categories, old business and new, because there's 4 seasons that are on Netflix now.
Right.
They have 4 episodes each season. And gosh, this is just really great storytelling with the documentary format.
So I want to start off by saying that Charles asked us to watch seasons 1 and 2, which is 8 episodes. And I was going to go do just that. And then when I went to do it, Netflix has the thing set up kind of confusingly. And the first thing it played was the first episode of season 4. So I'm watching it, and it is it's hosted by Shad is the guy who runs the thing, and he's in New Orleans and looking at bounce, and and he's looking at like all this, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. He's starting from like this sort of outside the hip hop mainstream. That's kind of cool. I expected he would start with like New York City in the '70s and you know go through Def Jam and that kind of stuff. That is in fact what he does. It's just if you watch it first. But that was kind of cool to get in and see this like look at the New Orleans scene, which is something he does later on.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I watched all of season 4 because there's some really fun, interesting stuff. He goes to Atlanta. He covers some different stuff. And then I went back and watched season 1. And season 1 is what you would expect. It goes into the New York scene, and then it slowly drifts into like the West Coast and all that kind of stuff. And I've known a little bit of this stuff. I picked up on stuff from our fictional stuff that is like the Get Down covers a lot of the same territory. The Slate podcast, Slow Burn, 3rd season, did a lot of the Biggie and Tupac thing. And
I've heard a lot of these guys called out in rap lyrics for years.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, who's Rick Rubin? Like,
yeah, and the Wu-Tang show, the American, what's it called? Wu-Tang Hulu show.
American Saga.
Yeah,
American Saga. So I learned a little bit of that. So I've seen bits and pieces of this, and I just watched the Beastie Boys documentary, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I didn't know a lot of this, and I hadn't seen it quite in this sort of want to say chronological way, in the way it's laid out. And this is one
of the best ways I've ever seen this put together. Being a kid that wanted to be into rap, I love English, I love wordplay. I was a writing nerd as a kid, but I was growing up in rural Texas, and there was very much a pressure to not listen to rap, both because my parents were upstanding Christian and it was very 90s congressional hearings about rap lyrics and shit, but also just from a racism standpoint of it being uncomfortable to cross that cultural line and am I listening to music I should be listening to?
Right. Yeah.
And so...
and I feel like that's a lot of the appeal of this. I found myself fitting sternly in that category of the white kids whose parents didn't want them to listen to this, and that's why they wanted to listen to it more, and how that fueled the industry. I thought that was a super interesting part of the story and the chronology.
And so for me, I mean, as a music nerd in general, what I was doing with all the music I was listening to in high school was pouring through liner notes and trying to figure out, who was the same producer that's on this other album too, and is that why this sounds like this, and that kind of shit. And so the one way that I could kind of safely get into rap was through nerding out about kind of the history and who the players were and who these people were. And it's great because, it, like you said, it comes up in lyrics. Like they name check each other. It's great.
Yep.
As opposed to rock. Like rock doesn't. Most rock lyrics of Aerosmith's not name dropping everybody in the band with them, but hip hop will. And so a few years ago, we're all comic nerds. Ed Piskor did a comic series called Hip Hop Family Tree that does this same kind of, let's tell this as a narrative history, because this is an art form that was listening to each other literally and building and playing off each other. And so some of this I knew, but I'd never seen it connected this well. This documentary is very nicely done. This isn't like when I go down a YouTube rabbit hole and see the best made home story of hip hop or whatever. It's still not going to look as professional as this. This shit looks so good, and the interviews are so good.
Yeah,
I was going to say that's one of the things. The interviews are so good, and he got everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Grandmaster Flash is in here. He's talking to Curtis Blow, I think. He talked to Curtis Blow, didn't he?
Yeah,
And,
I believe so.
Russell Simmons.
Russell Simmons.
By not talking about just one, like just East Coast. I mean, they have to break it down. They break it down somewhat by genre a little bit, but also going by geography. They help show this call and response of what was happening in New York, and then what California did in response to hearing that trickle across in mixtapes and shit, and then like what the response back was, and by the time you get to season 4 and you get out of me being in high school and nerding out about this shit, and we start getting into stuff where I'm like, what the fuck is bounce?
Yeah, yeah. That's like,
and then a little bit of like, is it season 4? Do they talk about? I know we're out of where we were asked to watch, but it's season 4 where they finally talk about Houston and Screw.
I
music.
feel like Houston showed up earlier. 3. Yeah, I think it was season 3.
Yeah.
And they talk about the tapes that
Yes.
everybody listened. Like, yeah, there's stuff in here like
They had to open a music store because they had a line out their fucking yard in a residential neighborhood, and the cops were sure they were dealing.
I've picked up on some of this stuff from various, like the NWA biopic, which is really great. Like I picked up some of that stuff, and even Treme had some of the bounce stuff in it. So I've picked up from watching fictional TV some of the stuff, even from the esoteric. But one of the things I like about this is that some of the stuff I listen to like the Slate podcast Slow Burn goes deep on one thing, like the Biggie Tupac thing, but this goes wide and covers everything. Like there's a couple things. I do feel like the Beastie Boys got kind of short shrift. They got mentioned once, but there's a whole other documentary I can watch about the Beastie Boys. But there was stuff I'd never heard of here.
I also feel like that other documentary kind of explains why they're only at the beginning of this story.
Yeah.
And like they really only fit into one part of hip hop.
Yeah, for
Then
sure.
then they're their own thing. Well, and we'll get into that in a moment.
Can I share the 2 facts that I thought were just like blew my mind?
Yeah.
The first one was that the 1992 hit of the summer, Rump Shaker, all I want to do is zoom zoom and shake your rump. That lyrics for that and music was produced by Pharrell.
Fucking Pharrell.
Yeah.
While he was a senior in high school, he was writing hits
He wrote
for the
fucking
summer.
Rump Shaker. That dropped my jaw.
Okay, I have another jaw dropper in the same vein, which I guess I just didn't know this. But Les, you are somewhat famous in our group for doing the Humpty Dance at karaoke by the Digital Underground, and I didn't realize the Digital Underground was where Tupac fucking Shakur came from.
No, he's a dancer. He's a background dancer
That's
for them.
so crazy.
There was a recent biopic about him that was controversial. I think Jada Pinkett Smith's had some issues with how they portrayed it. I can't remember the name of it now.
Yeah.
But it touched on them giving him his first break and stuff. Speaking of, and this is Ben Folds used to do a cover of Bitches Ain't Shit. Is anybody familiar with, have you ever heard his version of it?
Yeah,
Okay,
I have.
yeah, I think so.
I have.
Okay. Well, in his autobiography, which I've not read, but he apparently wrote an autobiography a few years ago, where there's a biography of Ben Folds. He talks about why he won't play that live anymore at all.
Interesting.
That somebody made it clear to him that as much as he, like, it doesn't really matter how much he loves that song. It's really not helpful for him to perform it. And so he stopped, and so he put out a statement on his Facebook today that he is actually going a step further now in light of the coming a little bit further personally on understanding that that's appropriation and weird and not helpful. And so he's actually reaching out to Spotify and such, and his record labels that song is going to go away.
Interesting.
Oh wow.
He's gonna try to pull that.
I don't know how to feel about that. Like, I feel like I get it, but like to take something completely out of the culture is weird.
I think he wants to. I think it's more that he wants to. I mean, he can't go to. If you have a copy, I have a copy of it. Like it's not going to go away. But I think he wants to not make future residuals off it.
That basically makes sense. That makes sense.
Because like, hey, I stopped playing it live, but it's still in this check somewhere.
Right.
And so reading that, and all I could think of was the times that it's come up for me, and I've gone, it's not that big a deal, and because I fucking love doing Humpty Dance at karaoke, and it's probably not cool at all.
Were you guys ever fans of Juvenile? Did you ever listen to him or back that ass up?
I know who he is, but I couldn't.
You back that ass up.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So I knew. I'm very familiar with the song. It was really popular when I was in high school, junior high, somewhere around there. And at the end of it, there's this rapper who comes on and just goes crazy saying, drop it like it's hot, like a million times. Like, drop it like he was the drop it like it's hot guy. And I never knew the connection until now that was Lil Wayne. And obviously, I know the impact Lil Wayne has had on rap since then. But it's so funny because I've heard that song a million times, and I never once put those two people together, that he was actually part of the group that Juvenile was in and, was guested on that track and stuff.
So I do want to say one of the things I like about this also is that it is heavily focused on like the hip-hop that came from the streets and is sort of like was underground to some extent. But I do like that they get into... MC Hammer is featured here, and that makes sense because that was sort of a big thing for bringing it into the mainstream. I'm noticing as I look though that Will Smith doesn't feature anywhere in here, and I'm like, does that? I mean, Will Smith is a rapper. Does he not belong in this, or is that so poppy that it doesn't belong in this thing?
I'm honestly I'm shocked because I mean even if that is a slight in there, just wanting to bag on Will Smith being the suburban dad of rap or something. DJ Jazzy Jeff is respected. I feel regardless of whether or not whether you like Will Smith or not. But either way, parents just don't understand. Did the Lord's work of expanding the marketable like selling base for hip hop or for rap?
Well, and I think there's two things to think about with this. You're absolutely right with that, and they touched on that a lot with like Sugar Hill Gang, and Beastie Boys. But I think that honestly, there's an episode for Will Smith, and it's probably in a future season where they talk about when rappers really started to monetize these careers and become entertainers, doing films, endorsements, things like that,
right?
And the people that did the crossover too, so went from film and television over to rap, which I don't know which one Will Smith started with, but I feel like he's definitely part of that story. And they go into like the Miami bass culture of hip hop and kind of the start of that. And I'm imagining that's probably like right before Will Smith his time.
That makes sense.
I may be wrong on that.
No, that makes sense. I can actually, and also then you can talk about Ice Cube and Ice-T and how they went from sort of not safe for white suburbia, and then all of a sudden they're like household names because of Law and Order and like Ice Cube's various movies.
I do love the Patton Oswalt level kind of bait and switch of the generation that is, or the fans that are watching Ice-T every week on Law and Order, and then go Google him and find like body count and shit. Because like,
or
Ice-T's not fucking around.
In the Gangster Rap episode 4, season 1, where they just had endless clips of people going, "Oh yeah, fuck the police." Like, everybody was, that made sense to me. I was thinking fuck the police before he said it.
I love that somebody pointed out this past week of like, it's not everybody with a badge that we're mad at I mean, there's no "fuck the fire department" song. NWA wouldn't fuck them EMTs.
So yeah, this was great. I hope there's more of it because I actually really enjoyed this, and I like you said, there's some stuff in there to talk about a little bit more too.
I am a sucker for hip hop history anyway, or just music nerd history. I love almost any of the how did this all get made, but this is also just a history that like all other marginalized community histories, even the one about their art form, for at least 2 decades of this music, this was not taken seriously as music, and this was not considered to be part of the worthwhile history to teach to us about popular music if you were going and finding out who was hot right now. Like, well, this is the hot artist, and then those guys are making rap.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, like that conversation about Will Smith and people finally becoming moguls and monetizing this shit and branching out. I remember reading discussions a few years ago, 15, 20 years ago, that made no sense to me at the time, of rappers talking about how they were not being considered, their albums weren't albums to the record label.
Right.
Their albums were just a collection of singles. And so in that view, you'll do different shit or you won't market it, or you won't give a fuck about the album. You'll just market the single, and you'll make a deal that makes some short-term cash because you don't believe in this as an album. It's not, you could tell no label believed that any rapper was ever going to make Dark Side of the Moon or Pink Floyd's, like anything that was going to be like a whole like a concept album.
Yeah.
And so it was just singles just to make some cheap cash on and then get the fuck out.
So let's jump over and talk about the Beastie Boys story, which is over on Apple Plus, because the Beastie Boys, they get a brief mention here, but the Apple Plus thing is actually it's a live stage show that took place in New York. The stage show is directed, produced, and written by Spike Jonze, who did some of the most famous videos, and it is Michael Diamond and Adam Horovitz, the two surviving Beastie Boys, on the stage, basically going through.
Wait, what?
Oh, did you just learn something terrible?
Spoiler.
I knew I should have watched this before the show. Fuck.
Sorry.
This reminded me a lot of that Hassan.
Yes, I just spoiled MCA's death for Leslie.
All right, go on.
No, this format, this reminded me a lot of that Hassan Minaj thing we saw a couple years ago at that Google amphitheater, where it's almost like a stage show meets PowerPoint presentation, but done not in a boring way, like in a very engaging, entertaining way.
Yeah, they've got a screen behind them, and they will occasionally show clips and pictures and stuff, but it's basically the two of them talking to the audience and goofing on each other and having fun, and I found it super infectious. I thought it was delightful. I'm not always a biopic guy. I'm not always a history guy, but this was so well done. And there's some funny jokes, like they miss a sound cue. They don't actually miss a sound cue. They make fun of the thing. They're going to have a sound cue, and then it comes. Yeah, that's it. And it comes in later, and it just killed me. Like they're clearly having a good time, and there's such reverence for Adam Yauch. In the way they talk about him and how much they're like, yeah, that guy was the spirit of the Beastie Boys and made a lot of the stuff work. And they're also sort of warts and all about their own history. Like they talk about, they opened up and they were these guys who were basically these dumb white. They were the epitome of dumb white guys rapping.
They're a fucking punk band,
and they were getting like all these frat boys were like in love with their fight for your right to party and girls and all this stuff, and they realized that like we were kind of putting on a persona here, and increasingly it just became about us getting drunk on stage and acting like idiots, and that's not who we wanted to be. And they talk about Adam, sort of the apologies they made for girls and some of the sort of misogynist stuff, and the fact that they had two women in their band. They had a female drummer and they had a female, was it a bassist, I think? Mm-hmm. And that they basically, when they sort of made it big, Russell Simmons kind of had them cut everybody else out there, the Beastie Boys, and all of a sudden these girls who had been like formative for them were suddenly just gone. And that
they didn't fit the mold of making these guys look like
exactly
Run DMC and the Fat Boys, and I mean like. We're going to put you boys in tracksuits. There's 3 of you. Let's do this.
Yeah, and they went back and apologized, and it turns out one of those girls formed Luscious Jackson, which is amazing.
Which I believe ended up on Grand Royal Records years later.
Yeah. They also talk about, there's some fun stuff. They talk about like Russell Simmons and, is it Rick Rubin? I think it was Rick Rubin.
Yep,
Yeah.
Rick Rubin.
And they're like, we kind of feel like they pay a lot of homage to it, but there's also a feeling of like, they kind of just wanted a white rap band. Like, it could have been any white rap band. It wasn't about us being us. It was, they wanted some white guys who could rap. And how they found their sound. They talk about how the bass group for Sabotage came about. They talk about this crazy house they lived in.
Was that for Paul's Boutique?
Yes, and they talk about Paul's Boutique and how much they loved it and how bad the critical reception
their career
was
for that. Yeah, no, I mean, like, people don't. I don't think people understand now that they ended their career.
Yeah,
like the Beastie Boys made that one album and then they were fucking done.
Yeah,
and nobody heard anything out of them until Sabotage.
Yeah,
and if they had not done Sabotage, we'd not be talking about them right now.
I didn't
really.
know it. I didn't know any of that.
Because it wasn't until years later, I think, that people went back and checked out Paul's Boutique.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like one of the first things I ever read about the Beastie Boys or about them making that album. The Dust Brothers made that, the guys that did the music for Fight Club.
Yep.
Weirdly, they also produced Hanson's Bop album, Chemical Brothers and shit. Anyway, the Dust Brothers were DJs that they cut up these really fast, crazy fucking samples and shit, and the Beastie Boys had heard them and went to them after when they were like, hey, we don't want to be Fight for Your Right. What do we want to do for the next album?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, can you guys make an album of beats? And the Dust Brothers were like, you can't rap over this, though. I mean, like, like, think about rap at the time, you know? Like, you go into the hat store to buy a hat. Like, like, that was the extent of rap beats. And they literally were these guys and were like, we want a sound collage that is bug shit crazy and let us worry about rapping over it.
Yeah, and they talk about that a lot. I mean, you probably knew a lot of this already, Les, because you're much more of a music head than I am. But this was fascinating to me. I'm like a casual fan of the Beastie Boys. Like, I love the Beastie Boys, but I don't know that much about them. And this was like learning all their history and seeing all the sort of the journey they went on. And it was so much fun to see these guys basically go from the young punks to basically now one of the elder statesmen of rap. Like, it was a blast.
Their ability to not be giving lip service to having grown, but like the realization across my adult life that like, oh shit, the Beastie Boys really actually grew up.
Yeah.
like Mike Diamond, like they're not using bigger words like Deadwood style, but still sounding totally fucking stupid or giving shit lip service to something or whatever. Like, they've kept this up for so long now that like it's sincere, and I think that it helps me feel great that like, as fucking dumb as I was in high school and junior high and shit, when I was screaming Brass Monkey and Girls at the top of my lungs and shit, that like, if the same guys that did that can grow and be and make great stuff, the whole art, you know, it's not like they matured and stopped being great. I love the Beastie Boys through their whole fucking career.
Yeah.
It really, they were it's kind of like finding out Snoop Dogg is the like elder statesman grandpa that like all of America loves Snoop. I'm baffled that like all of America looks up to like, oh, you know, the Beastie Boys, those are smart guys.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like the thing is, bands are always breaking up. We always hear the story of like Fleetwood Mac or like, you know, how these guys they're having a reunion concert because they haven't done anything in 20 years. The Beastie Boys, like, they had that little, you know, period after, you know, the first album, but they stayed together. Like, you know, it's a super hopeful story, you know, in a time when everything's so crazy, of like this group of guys that just got each other and like made each other better. And, you know, some of the anecdotes about how, you know, I loved every moment, but I'd still come home and complain about the other guys and how much I hated that they didn't like my song or they did this. But it's like, look what we did afterwards, you know? Like, the song we made was way better than what I did.
Like, there's a period there where they stopped writing together in their lyrics, and there's a period where then I can't remember which album. I think it was the Intergalactic album was the first time that they had written verses together. In a couple of albums, and you can hear that difference. Like we were talking about karaoke earlier. If you've ever heard anybody with two of their drunk frat buddies try to step up and do a Beastie Boys song with three people, I guarantee, just get a drink and sit. It will be the greatest faceplant failure that you've ever seen on a karaoke stage. Nobody can do it. everybody will fuck it up. Their lyrics flow like they're. I love how tight they are. Like that camaraderie on stage is just amazing.
So to talk about a little bit about karaoke, which I also love, one of my favorite karaoke memories is there was a convention here in Austin. It was like it was called thespill.con. It was kind of where I met Kyle. I think it was through this website. So they had one of the spill.cons. This was during my cancer treatment. I got to go to spill.con, and there was a live band called Karaoke Apocalypse. And I got up and got to do Sabotage with a live band in front of the crowd of people who were fans of me from the podcast. And
I remember this.
Oh my God. It may be the best karaoke experience I've ever had. I remember my buddy Nate messaged me the next morning. He's like, "Good morning, Mr. D." It's like, it remains one of my best memories. It was so good. And getting to get up and do that song was such a blast. And that's the thing. It's like the Beastie Boys stuff is so joyous. And like you talk about, it's hard. If you've ever gotten up and tried to do Sure Shot and realized, oh shit, this is hard. But when you get it right, it's so much fun. And their songs are so good and so joyous. And that's so in evidence on the Beastie Boys story too. Like the two of these guys, yeah, they've grown up, but they've known each other since they were dumb kids, and they still like joke with each other. It's like watching these grown men who are now my age or a little older enjoy their sort of, they still share that youth experience and that sort of being friends for 20 years. And it's a blast. I really
driving around New York, egging people, like, yeah.
Also, that night you sang Sabotage, Randy, a little behind the scenes action. Not only was it fantastic, but everybody was signing up for that song. And it was like, who did they give that song to? And then, it was you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, I think when I looked on the list, there was like 3 or 4 people who all wrote down Sabotage.
That's funny. Yep, that's one of my songs, and I'm so glad I got it.
Did y'all see that Fight for Your Right Revisited that the Beasties did a few years ago?
No.
Where they redid a whole video for Fight for Your Right?
I did not.
So it's called Fight for Your Right Revisited, and if you want to see how widespread and insane the love for the Beastie Boys is, it is everyone and their dog in this video. Seth Rogen, Will Ferrell, and anybody who could cram into it is in there.
Oh, nice. All right, so let's change gears a little bit here from hip hop over to food. I don't know if I'm the only one who watched this. You guys watch any of Taste the Nation with Padma?
I watched the first one.
I did. I watched the first 2, which yeah.
So this is on Hulu. This is her new show where she's going on a journey across the United States to explore different foods. And what I thought was interesting about this, we've seen a lot of food travel shows. Like I'm a fan of them. No Reservations is probably the pinnacle, but Somebody Feed Phil. I'm trying to think what some of the other ones are that are like food travel shows. There's a ton of them.
Chef and the Choi Show.
Ugly Delicious.
Ugly Delicious, yeah.
And going back a little ways, you can go with a Man versus Food and that kind of stuff. So Padma's taking what she's doing here is like, she is an immigrant who came to the U.S. when she was like 4 years old, and she is sort of exploring how immigrants have created the food culture of the U.S. There's a not so subtle message in there, given how immigrants are being treated, but it's interesting because like in the first episode, she sits down with a guy who's a Trump supporter who runs a restaurant in El Paso, and I was like, I don't know how she did it, because she's like holding his hand. He's this old guy. She's being very respectful to him, and he is just, I wanted to punch him in the dick. And Padma is treating him like a respected grandfather.
Because he flat up like, I'm going to vote for him again. I mean, what choice do I have? And like literally any other choice, you could just stay home, man.
Yeah, and I was I was so impressed with
you
sort
could
of her.
die before then.
I was sort of impressed with her grace and her ability to sort of see things. This is similar to what Sarah Silverman did what I thought was a bad version of this, where she was like, let's go talk to Trump voters and see that they're all human after all and all that kind of thing. I had no time for that shit.
Yeah, no. Rather than that, I'd rather go watch Hate Thy Neighbor.
So
which is spectacular, and we should talk about sometime.
I thought Padma did a great job of like, and that's not what the whole show is about, but she definitely does a good job of like going to each culture, going into each place, and sort of hearing out what it is about their culture that made this food good. And also, she clearly just loves the food and enjoys it.
Yeah.
For a woman who's that skinny at age 49, I don't know how she loves food as much as she does.
In that
I was wondering that myself.
Watching them process the corn with limestone and talking about like no, this is one of those things that this is how Hispanic culture works. If you don't prep the corn in this way, there's a protein change that doesn't happen, and that means that our diet stops working.
Yeah.
And like realizing I like food science little stuff like that of like, oh yeah, no, you gotta, if you aren't preparing in the traditional way and this is all you're eating, it's gonna go wrong.
She gets some really good access wherever she goes because she's super disarming. Not only does she have a great personality, you were talking about her with the Trump supporter guy, she is a very beautiful woman.
And smart as hell.
But and she's real quick, and so I mean, like, she's on her toes wherever she is. Like, I mean, she's in a new situation, but she's with it, you know?
She comes off as very smart, very funny, very sweet, but also, you know, from watching her on Top Chef, she's got a little edge to her, too.
Mm-hmm.
I love the one where I think it was in episode 2. She was with like a brewer, and every time the guy was like pouring her a beer, he was just like,
yeah,
here's a beer.
So that was one thing I thought was interesting. In the second episode, she's talking about how German food has sort of disappeared into American culture. She's like, yeah, we look at like beer and hot dogs and all this stuff, and we don't even think of the German origins of it. We think of it as American food. And she talks about how that goes back to World War I and World War II, where Germans, as a matter of self-defense, had to basically fade into America, and stuff like that is throughout this thing. Like she goes and talks to the Gullah, which is the cuisine in, God, I want to say it's Georgia, but it's from people who were former slaves, and it's a form of cooking, and it's a native to America type cuisine I'd never heard of.
I'm not much on food travel shows, and this struck me better than most. And I think it's because, similar to No Reservations, she doesn't just spend time on the food, or like she acknowledges the context of how this cuisine grew up and like these people and where they live. Like, it is fucking impossible to go to El Paso and not acknowledge. I love that she did, partly for the mic issues, not acknowledge what border patrolling has done to living there. That the amount of helicopters overhead is real. That is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like, friends of mine from the Rio Grande Valley talk about blimp drones, like seeing drones all the time. That all the time, like if you're outside and you look up, there's a damn drone or a helicopter or something. It's and that you feel it, that it's weird, and you know you're living under it. And like, I love that she got there and was like, this is fucking weird.
So I watch a fair amount of food shows, and I'm a bit of a foodie. I'm not like a super gourmet, but I've eaten a lot of different food, and there was definitely some stuff here where I'm like, oh, I need to eat that food. She did Peruvian cuisine.
I wanted a burrito and a homemade tortilla so bad.
Oh yeah, I
got so mad. I went over and actually made tortillas, and mine had mold on them, and I was like, fuck.
So she went and did Peruvian cuisine, which there's a Peruvian food, a couple of Peruvian places in Austin, which now I'm gonna have to make a trip for. She went to Hawaii to do poke. She did a Native American episode where they talked about Native American food, which is really interesting. And then of course she did like a Chinese food where they talked about how Chinese food became chop suey and what exactly is chop suey and how Americanized it was and how it became Chinese food again. And then also like Indian food and how there's not more Indian food and that kind of stuff. So she definitely, and Iranian food and how that tied into like she's talking about how food is modified by the political climate. And I think there's a lot of like, she never comes out and says, this is about what Trump is doing to our culture right now. But it is underneath it throughout the entire thing, and not in an accusatory way, but in sort of a way where if you were a Trump voter and watched this, you would slowly be programmed with the idea of, hey, maybe it is bad to think so badly of immigrants.
It's not top down to hate these people. Like I don't want to go just stop Trump from telling people immigrants are bad. Like, to diffuse that and short circuit that, you got to point out to the base of that pyramid, hey, you guys are eating a fuckload of German immigrant food and a fuckload of Mexican food and a fuckload, like, we eat more salsa than ketchup. Like, we Yeah, I would much rather our immigration conversation be whether or not tacos are sandwiches.
They always say art is about the time it's written in, not the time it's written about. And even though they're talking about food culture from all, points of history, you're absolutely right. This is a show that's very much about today, right now.
Yeah. So this led us down a couple of rabbit holes, and I'll talk about one of the ones I led to. But Kyle, you said you've been watching another show on Hulu, a British show, if it's to be believed.
Oh, imagine that! I love them accents. In fact,
I forget how much of an Anglophile you are until I start watching a show, and I'm like, oh, of course Kyle loves this show.
Well, and I think, Les, you worked the math out this week. Like, you figured out the significance of, like, just adding that accent to a show and how much better it becomes because of it.
Well, how much more British, at least? Like I think Randy had asked if in the future we could warn him how much of a show's enjoyment is dependent on its Britishness. Like, for example, Downton Abbey is 100%, like 100/100. It is a British show.
Yes.
There's no other genre. It is both British and its genre is British.
That's correct.
Whereas Red Dwarf is 95% British and 5% sci-fi.
Right.
The 80s. It's hard for me to tell decades on British television shows because they look like they're from community
Shows
theater from the
2015.
50s. But the Hitchhiker's Guide show from back that's like a 50-50, maybe 60-40 British to sci-fi split. And so you can do this with all. Great British Baking Show is ironically 70-30. It's only 70% British. 30% of that is actually just being outside.
So I'm curious to hear what your breakdown of this is, because I describe this as if America has no reservations, this is the British version of that, just reservations.
Reservations, yes, yes.
Where Richard Ayoade gets 48 hours on a travel vacation where he brings another comedian with him. Often it's a British comedian. And they just see a different location. And this is actually, I believe, a spin-off of another show he did called Future Man's the other one. Gadget Man.
Gadget Man, yeah.
Tell me they'd send him to the future.
Where, that'd be a show right there.
He just steps into a closet that turns really, really bright white, and then he steps back out a second later and tells this whole thing about the 48 hours he spent in the future.
I would watch that, actually.
From the future. But no, this is a similar premise where in Gadget Man, he was taking a friend along while they explored new technology, often kind of wackier type of stuff. But here, no, it's a lot more straightforward. It's a vehicle for him to go and kind of get his style out there, which the guy's a brilliant author. He writes, again, it's very dry humor. But he writes some wildly entertaining and imaginative stuff that is just so mundane. And he brings that same sensibility to the writing of the show and to the presenting.
It's a Stephen Fry, Steve Martin kind of vibe to me on his writing and his style. He's real quick. I watch everything with subtitles anyway, but I'm really glad I did with the episode of Travel Man I watched, because his wordplay is so fast. It's like watching the alliteration starts to some of the Letterkenny episodes. You can tell that he is agonized over this intro.
I've read autobiographical parts of his books, and I don't know if he's joking or not, but from what I can surmise, he just read as a kid. That's all he did and all he wanted to do. Even when they go on road trips and stuff, he'd just be like, I want to read right now. I wish we were indoors and not outdoors.
It sounds like he's a kid.
So it is kind of a fish out of water type take on the travel, which, to be honest, he enjoys a lot of the places that they go and visit. But, he's really quick to, I believe in one episode I'm watching, they go to a soccer match, and he's just like, not for me.
I love that.
No appeal for me whatsoever.
Unlike the Amsterdam episode, he's taking this comedian around, and he takes him to an automat and gets food, and he's like, oh, no, I'm not going to eat that. So you brought me here to eat a thing that you will not eat. Yes. He keeps doing that over and over of oh no, we're supposed to go here, but this looks horrible to me. He still goes through with it. He's a good sport, but it's bare minimum good sportness. That friggin' chair swing that swings in the Amsterdam episode, they get on a chair swing in this tall building, and it's like the Stratosphere in Vegas, and it swings you out over the edge, and both of them have problems with heights, and so it's just two very droll British people who are very quietly going, no, This is not for me. No. No, you can bring it back now. No.
Oh, I wonder how beloved this guy is over there, because I know that the attempts that I've seen where he's tried to break into American audiences, I think of the IT Crowd American version. They did the pilot where essentially it was him, but with Joel McHale as the other lead. And then he was in that Ben Stiller movie.
The Watch, which he directed.
He directed that as well?
I believe, yeah.
Yeah, because his part wasn't very big in it. It was pretty much just a vehicle for the rest of them. But with both of those, I'm like, this guy is great. Everybody's going to love him. He's going to be a huge star over here. And he hasn't quite, broken the barrier yet. But he's still making tons of stuff over there, and I love it. And I'm going to keep watching it.
I am wrong. I don't think he directed The Watch. He was just in it.
Oh, okay.
He directed a bunch of Dark Place.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
And
Garth Marenghi's
Submarine.
And Submarine
Has gotten a lot of good, critical
So,
praise.
So I only watched one episode of Travel Man, but I did watch the entirety of Top Chef Season 1. Because it turns out all of Top Chef is on Hulu. And I started with Season 8 with the All-Star season. And I've become a huge fan. I'm not a giant reality fan in general. But I really like Top Chef. And after finishing the All-Star season recently, the newest All-Star season, I was like, my buddy Nick was watching it, and he'd said, yeah, all 15 previous seasons are on Hulu. I'm like, okay, well, I'll give this a shot. So I started watching Season 1 of Top Chef, which is 15 years ago. And it's so weird to watch, because Padma is not in the first season. It's Katie Lee, I think, who does not have the charisma, and is also she feels a little stilted. She definitely is not Padma.
Hashtag not my Padma.
And Tom Colicchio looks the same. That dude is not aged at all. But this was also it was a new concept, and so the theme music is there, and the kitchen looks like the same thing, and the general vibe of it is they've got judges table and all that stuff. But they were bringing in people who were not big chefs at this point. They were bringing in people who were line cooks. Nobody had a restaurant, I don't think. They were all one guy worked in a hotel kitchen. One woman was a model who was just starting to cook. And it was she did not, there's this mix of half the people didn't belong there. They just didn't have the skills. And the half who did were so arrogant about the skills they had that I wound up hating all of them. But I was watching the first episode and I was messaging Nick because he'd been watching it. And I was like, okay, I hate this person, this person, this person. He called one of the guys yeah, that guy's a cockroach, and that is accurate. There's a dude who's a sommelier, and he is the most he's the most insufferable human being I've seen on the show, and I have seen Marcel. So this is he was such a horrible human being. And they loved him so much because he would just say shit. So he was all over the show because they would do all the talking heads. And he stuck around for a long time because he had some skills, but I hated him the whole time, and I was just rooting for him to go away, possibly permanently, possibly off the planet. And it was weirdly it was not enjoyable, but also I couldn't stop watching it. and I kind of enjoyed hating all of them. By the time we got into episode 2, where my favorite to win it, who I was like, oh, she's actually a good chef, and she seems like she's not terrible. She threw this bitchy fit about how she didn't want to cook for kids. And she's like, I'm a chef, I don't cook for kids. And Tom Colicchio was like, your attitude sucks, and if you didn't have immunity, you'd be going home for this. And I was like, oh, right, I hate all of them. And by the time they got to the Top Chef, I wouldn't want any of them to win. I wanted there to be no Top Chef that year. But
that's great.
But season 2, Padma comes in, and I think the show becomes a little bit more what it is, and it's compelling TV. It's really fascinating to watch. But they were definitely doing the MTV Real World. Let's get these big personalities. Let's get them all fighting, which is not what I watched Top Chef for. And it was weird to see that in Top Chef when Tom Colicchio and Gail Berman are still there, and they're like, what are we doing in this circus? This is not what we do. And I wonder if they kind of stepped on the production and was like, look, let's make this about the food and not about the personalities. So now what I want is a Beastie Boys story style back behind the scenes of Top Chef, where I see the battles between the producers and the showrunners, and see what Top Chef actually was, what the fighting was like. That's what I want now.
I wonder if that's where TV is going. Like, we're going to have the history of reality TV. They already do the history of YouTube channels. Mm-hmm. Like, there's other YouTube channels that tell you how a YouTube channel got started and, what it did year over year.
You think we're
like, the only after show like Talking Dead or whatever that I really would give a fuck about it. Like, I don't want to watch the reality show itself, but I have watched all of the show Unreal, which is like a fictionalized show about the backstabbing that is happening trying to produce The Bachelor, essentially, or fake Bachelor. And so, like, I don't give a fuck about watching The Bachelor, but if there were an after show where, like, everybody just had, like, 4 fingers of scotch in a glass and we're like, oh, fuck that dude, man. Did you see the dude shove him in the pool? Oh, did we not get that on camera? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah,
like, I'd watch the fuck out of that.
There is a reunion in the first season. There is episode 10 is a reunion show, which took place before the finale, where they had the last 3 cook against each other, or last 4, I guess. And it had everybody in there, including the crazy sociopath of the first episode named Ken, who I swear to God I thought was going to cut somebody. And I couldn't watch that reunion show because I didn't want to ever see him again. But I'm like, it was like they did that, and I kind of want that. I remember Survivor, when I watched Survivor Season 2, they did a big episode, like, finale, where they brought everybody in and they talked about their experiences, and give me some of that. I do wonder if, Kyle, if you're right, though, if we're going to see TV basically disappear up its own asshole, just like, here's how we made this show you just watched. I mean, The Mandalorian has a, 8-episode show about making The Mandalorian now?
Which I've seen all of it. Can we bring that up?
I've only seen 1 episode. Is it good?
Oh, I dig into that stuff. I'm a bonus features guy when I get the Blu-rays. So, like, and the screen that they shoot on, The Void, which is just this, like, state-of-the-art soundstage. They're going to do Obi-Wan on it. Everything is going to start getting shot on here.
I had heard that the reason to watch that behind the scenes is because some of the tech they used on Mandalorian is game changing.
They have definitely. I mean, we were just talking earlier about how we were talking about Jar Jar Binks and, like, playing to green screen, and it's like, no, that's not. They don't have to imagine anymore. They're really in the sets. Like, maybe they can't sit at that table, but they can see the table and they can see the light coming through the window and the aliens and whatever.
I want to say on Solo, maybe, or in one of the recent Star Wars movies, when they were making the Falcon cockpit, they were able to put in live screens so that when they threw it into hypergear, where, like, the actors, like, they could actually have, like, light shine on the act, like they could get.
And you can see that in the iris of the eye. You can see it reflected off the skin and the hair, like all places you wouldn't think of. And it saves so much time and money, which means we can get more Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, of all the times that I've complained about them going back and touching up Star Wars and just adding songs to cantinas and fucking things up, I don't mind the clouds out the window in Cloud City. Sure, makes sense.
Yeah.
The one time that they changed something that I loved is going in and adding ambient glow off of the fucking fluorescent bulb sword you're fighting with. Like, the fact that like in the original movies, lightsabers didn't cause the room to look red and blue.
Yeah.
It just bugged me. And they fit, like, I love that now. Like, when Rey or somebody lights up that lightsaber, you see it change the ambient light on them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's little, like, that little kind of shit is the stuff I'm here for.
No, the show is amazing and, like, the whole behind the scenes, but I'm like, isn't that what we were just complaining about? Watching shows about making other shows?
Yes.
And that's the thing. I think it's weird. It's like it's a weird thing, but at the same time, it's what I want, and I'm okay with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is the way.
And we're about to run out of new stuff or slow down on new stuff, maybe. So a whole industry of what was the Onion article a few years ago? If we don't slow down, we're going to run out of retro by 2036 or something like that. And it's these kinds of innovations that are going to keep us in retro.
All right, so let's jump over out of the reality bubble for one last show, which is The Politician, season 2 on Netflix, which I know. I was like, well, should we hold this a week? And Les was like, I burned through the whole thing in a day.
I just finished it. Let's just talk about it.
So I burned through it in 2 days because I love season 1 of this.
And for me, I don't know about you, like, it's a fluffy, fun. I love all the twists and turns kind of show, and season 2 was exactly the same for me. I was amazed that they did the throuple in a way that was so fun, and the back and forth of like which campaigns backstab, who's got a mole on who, was great. Yeah, I enjoyed the shit out of this season. This show is very fun. I found myself completely forgetting about season 1 a few months after. It's like eating cotton candy as a meal,
right?
But I love it, and I know that in a few years I'll be able to go back and watch this and be like, oh, okay, that was still fun.
So the lead, Ben Platt, is a guy I know from Pitch Perfect, and I think he's fantastic here. But the star of this particular season were 3 women: Judith Light, playing a New York State senator who is in a throuple, who is like his opponent. Gwyneth Paltrow playing his mom, who is in a weird. Who's successfully fallen out of her marriage to a rich guy who she didn't really get along with. Bob Balaban. Now she's in a lesbian relationship with a Hollywood power lesbian.
But she's running for governor of California on a secession plank.
Yes, and she's so popular. She's so popular and so beloved. And then the one who stole the whole season is Bette Midler playing Hadassah, the campaign manager and longtime political operative of Judith Light's character. In episode 1 or 2, she has this big rant about the whole situation, and she is just having so much fun. It comes through in every minute.
It's just Bette Midler at peak Bette Midler powers. And I don't know the name of the actress that plays McAfee.
Oh yeah, but she's great.
She was fantastic in season 1, and that character steals it for me again in season 2. Yep. Yeah, just I really enjoyed this show.
Also, Infinity, who was in the first season, she was Munchausen by proxy.
The proxy, his VP and
fake cancer, didn't have cancer but thought she had cancer. In this,
she's turned into a whole big celeb artist now,
and she's like a super environmental activist. And it becomes
her whole backstory of her year of becoming hardcore is insane. And he needs her fan base, basically.
When she basically turns it on, when she's like, no, you got to be carbon neutral and zero waste, and he's like, no, I don't want to do this. Like, she has this core of steel underneath her, where she's like, well, you want my audience, that's what you got to do.
Yep, you're gonna boil your gray water and drink it. Like, no.
I love the relationship he has with his girlfriend, and they're sort of like his ex-boyfriend's girlfriend. Like, there's a lot of weird sexual politics in this, and it's all handled really, really well.
And like, they're all people who are occasionally fucking psychopaths, but who have pangs of guilt. And so it's like, which one of the 5 or 6 of them is being a sociopath, is embracing their sociopath right now, and then we'll be regretting it next episode when another one embraces their sociopath.
Yeah.
The finding a way to bring back in Ricardo. Mm-hmm. Is that his name? Mm-hmm. Infinity's boyfriend from the only one who very nearly pulls off a perfect murder in the first season.
Yes,
he's the actual one that comes closest to an effective assassination. But and I guess we should announce, like, what I'm about to say is, if you've not watched Politician season 2, what I'm about to say is going to be spoilery. So skip ahead a minute. Mm-hmm, I don't know. Mm-hmm. The Rochambeau.
Oh my God!
So the entire election that they're running this entire season against Judith Light, like Ben Platt against Judith Light's character, mm-hmm. and all of their backstabbing and the throuple and all the reveal of it and the back and forth and all of this shit comes down to a tie.
Oh man,
and
so
this
good.
Is real. Ties in America are decided. Electoral ties are decided on some dumb shit. You can flip a coin. You can. A bunch of different shit, but all of it absolutely undoes the will of the voters, because it's now a fucking coin flip.
Man, the game theory that goes into the Rochambeau thing is insane and hilarious.
So they decide to do rock, paper, scissors. They decide to Rochambeau for it, and they go, and both camps are trying to learn the game theory of it, and they set up this Chekhov's gun of what I thought was going to happen, mm-hmm. of he actually, like, Ben Platt learns this, like, they go to Ricardo in prison, And because apparently every single, it's like Kimmy Schmidt level fucked up. Every argument in prison is settled through rock, paper, scissors, and he is king of it.
Yes.
Because there's a strategy. And Ben Platt learns the strategy perfectly. And I really thought they were setting it up because Judith Light can't do it.
Yeah.
Like, she can't just not do the strategy well. She so actively can't learn it that she fucks up people doing the strategy because she's so stupidly unpredictable.
Yeah.
And it really leads you to think that they're about to step down there and like, I really don't know who's going to win this because he is unbeatable, but so is she.
Yeah.
Kind of. Like,
yeah.
It's not that she's unbeatable, she's unpredictable.
It's like playing Texas Hold'em with someone who doesn't know how to play, where they can frustrate the hell out of a pro because they don't play in a way you should when you're holding those cards.
And like, you really think that's where it's going, and then they pull it out from under. They pull the rug out from under.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go that way, which so that was the spoilery bit. But oh my god, when they brought it down to Rochambeau and then didn't.
Yeah.
Like, that was a spectacular end of this season. And so, Randy, something I brought up to you, at the end of the season, we have a moment where Gwyneth Paltrow's character asks Judith Light to be her VP because she's going to make a run at the presidency.
Right.
Having won the governorship with 96% of the vote.
Right.
And they do it over FaceTime.
Mm-hmm.
Like split screen, like two screens, and it looks like the phone. You see the bottom of the bottom, like.
And you were wondering if that was the thing they did because of COVID.
It is the only thing in the whole season shot like that.
No, but the reason I think that was not done by COVID, unless they just decided to call attention to it, there is a bit of like Judith Light sort of frizzles out like you do when you're having a FaceTime chat.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if they were just doing it because they had to, I don't know that they would have called attention to it like that. But if they were doing
I don't know if they were just leaning into it.
Yeah. I feel like that was actually always there, but I don't know. It's an interesting idea, and I could totally see it. Also, I don't want to spoil it, but their setup for season 3, I'm like, oh, I'm so in. I want to see this.
Yeah, I'm down for more of this.
It's so much fun.
The slight change to the little box. I love the intro to this show anyway, but the slight change to the curio box of him. It's such a great song. Mm-hmm. Sufjan Stevens' Chicago is such a great song.
Yep.
I was so happy to have more of this.
Yeah, this was delightful, and I'm so happy that we burned through it, and now I have to watch season 3 in like a year or two. So but yeah, I definitely done it. All right, well, I think that wraps it up for us this week, fellas. Thank you to our patron Charles Armstrong for giving us Hip Hop Evolution as a assignment, which we greatly enjoyed. Thank you to all our patrons and to all our listeners. And remember that if you'd like to become a patron, there's just hours and hours and probably days of content waiting for you at our Patreon feed. If you need more to listen to in these COVID times, if you're stuck inside or should be. And thank you, Les. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks,
Randy.
And until next week,
TV Dudes out! The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast out of Austin, Texas. We are exclusively listener-supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/tvdudes.
You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at TV Dudes. All the music for our show is done by our friend and original TV Dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith.
To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com. I'm Randy Lander.
I'm Les Weiler.
And I'm Kyle Scott.
Thanks for listening.